Hi. Do you want the chance to win an all-inclusive holiday of a lifetime? 2 weeks to cruise and indulge in complete luxury? Or maybe to drive the car of your dreams? Then I'm afraid you're in the wrong place. This is the Slick Podcast. Keeping it real and always keeping it groovy.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or a very good day to you when and wherever you're listening from, and a very warm welcome to the show. I'm your host, Simon Laurie King, and this is the Slick Podcast.
You have tuned in for a Slick Podcast. I'm here to seek the truth. Live from Scotland around the UK. The one and only Slick Podcast. Enjoy the show. Can I ask important questions? No matter how bizarre the truth might be. Tune in for Slick Podcast. Keeping it real, keeping it groovy.
Coming up on today's show, my guest is Bob Paxman. Bob has served his country as a soldier, and after passing one of the most difficult military selection processes in the world, went on to continue his career in the most famous and elite regiments of the British Army as an SAS trooper. During his service, Bob and his men would find themselves in some of the most hostile places on earth. After shortly leaving the military and seeing a desperate need, Bob founded the charity Talking to Minds in 2008. I won't use the letters, I'll say the words, as I believe it important that people understand what the charity is about. Talking to Minds treats post-traumatic stress disorder. Although the charity treats people from all walks of life now, the emergency services, victims of serious crime or traumatic accidents, its initial ethos was veterans treating veterans. My guest today is also director of the specialist security company Paradigm, which, although based in Britain, operates around the globe, offering a range of professional solutions to dangerous and sometimes life-threatening situations. But I'll ask Bob about that a little later on the show. One of the main reasons for today's show is to also highlight that there is a problem in this country and it needs to be addressed. An increasing number of ex-military personnel are being completely let down by the government that they chose to serve. That's all I will say. As we get further into the show, I'll let you, the listener, decide if that statement was an exaggeration or a statement of fact. So without further delay, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Bob Paxman to the show.
Hi there, how are you doing? Thank you for inviting me.
Before I begin with the main questions I have for you, could you tell us a little about your early life as a young man joining the military and why it was that you decided on that huge life-changing decision?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my father was, he was former Royal Marine, Second World War in Japan. He then came back to UK after the war, did 27 years in the police force. Funny old thing, he was a bit of a public speaker. He led the Bring Back Hanging Bill for Essex and for London back in the 60s and 70s. But what happened was I was a bricklayer, and the construction industry crashed, obviously in the big recession at the end of the 80s, and I ended up unemployed for the first time in my life. And I'd been working overseas doing Auf Wiedersehen Pet as a bricklayer, and that all turned upside down. So I came back to UK, and I woke up one morning, literally, and thought, well, there's a possibility I could go and join the military. And it had been a taboo subject within the family because of the old man being out in Japan, at the end of the war, repatriating guys, it was a bit of an awakening for me, should I say? But and I've never looked back since.
So your career in the military led ultimately to passing the selection process for one of the top military regiments in the world, that of the elite SAS troop. Can you talk about what that took for you mentally and a little about what you had to endure physically in order to make that grade?
Yeah. Well, to start with, you've got to get yourself into a mental headspace to be able to go out and do all the physical preparation for it. So at the time, I was stationed over in Germany. We went and did a Northern Ireland tour. So I was out with the infantry in Northern Ireland, getting my infantry skills, honed, if you like, and also training, running around the Maze prison where we was based, and going up in the Mourne Mountains, and really beasting myself physically. And then the main problem is to get on selection. You've got to volunteer and apply for it. Well, there comes in manning issues with your regiments releasing you for selection. So we'd actually been turned down, and they warned us off for a trip to Kosovo. I think it was Kosovo. I think it was Kosovo or Bosnia, one of the two. And they basically flatly turned around and went, "No, you can't. You've been signed up for a tour." So the two of us that had been training during our time over in Northern Ireland, we decided that we'd go AWOL. So we got in a vehicle, drove back to UK, and then stopped at my friend's house. And his father was ex B Squadron 22 SAS, one of the old and bold. And we stopped at his house and then just kept going down into Wales for a couple of weeks, just for the last bit of training, navigation practice, and then starting the whole selection process. And once you get on selection, sorry, go on.
No, my apologies. Were the military police looking for you when you went AWOL?
No, in actual fact, all of the officers over in because I was former Royal Engineers, all of the officers over in Germany had sat down and basically taken a sweepstake out of who would pass and who would fail, and there was three of us from the regiment, the engineer regiment, came over on selection, and it was a case of if we'd have all failed, we would have got charged and probably jailed, but because one of us got through, it kind of all transpires that everybody got away with it. But a funny old thing, this was all confirmed when I passed selection and got down to Bryce Norton from a parachute course, from a jumps course. The officer who we'd spoken to, he'd actually been posted across, and he was OC of the jump school over in Bryce. So that was quite an interesting one.
As an SAS trooper, you would have been in armed conflict. I'm not going to ask you about those specific times, but I am going to ask you about the effects after the fact. How did you initially deal with the feelings that must have been conjured up inside you after those times? And I'm guessing for a long time after, this would be before you understood the deeper mechanisms of post-trauma.
Yes. The initial feeling is complete and utter elation. You've done something that you completed something that you actually wanted to join for. You've been involved in things that lots of other people would never experience in their lives. So initially, there's this whole elation around the whole thing, but for a period of time after I'd left, I didn't settle at all. So I kind of fell off the tracks, and I ended up going across to Africa, and I spent nearly 7 years over there, and I just volunteered for all of the most dangerous and ridiculous things that you could possibly get involved in, because I was trying to find myself again, because it was almost like I'd fallen outside of the family because I chose to leave. So it takes, with some people, they said that they reckon it takes somewhere in a region of sort of 10 to 14 years for somebody to develop the negative thought patterns and actually come forward for assistance with with nightmares and flashbacks and things. So yeah, it was quite a journey. And once I'd realised that picking up all of the dirty jobs, which I was very good at, wasn't the way ahead, then that was really the turning point.
Was there a point? I'll just add this question in quickly. Was there a point where self-talk came in? You said, "Bob, I need to change my ways." I mean, were you angry with other people, or were you withdrawn?
I was incredibly angry. I was angry with everything and everybody, and it was Mr. Punchy the whole time. which was not conducive to normal living, should I say.
Talking to Minds is a charity that is gaining momentum and a lot of credibility. This charity was set up in 2008 by you personally to help the sufferers of post-traumatic stress disorder. And as I understand it, Talking to Minds has a very high success rate due to its unique method of that treatment. Could you talk me through, in layman's terms, the basics of what it is that makes this therapy so successful and different to the traditional psychiatric approach?
Yeah, the traditional psychiatric approach is trauma focused, so they're focusing on the trauma. So so realistically, all they are doing is re-traumatizing somebody, or continuing to traumatize somebody. But the approach that we have, we're not actually focusing on the trauma itself, because the trauma itself and the negative emotions that are experienced didn't actually happen in that event. Because if you look at anger, sadness, fear, guilt, hurt, hate, anxiety, they weren't created in that event. They were created in the very, very early formative years. So we focus on the emotions themselves, and if you like, we find we help them find the opposite of the emotion, and there's a fair amount of quantum physics involved in this. Actually, you're taking the positive and the negative, and you're squashing them together so that they become a neutral. So the negative thoughts disappear and the negative emotions disappear. Yeah, but you're then left with a void. So then part of the process is then assisting them to fill that void with whatever's positive for them. And once you pull that change all the way through their timeline, because we're asking them to envisage this as a time in the past in their formative years. When you pull that through and out into the future, it's like pulling a sock inside out, and the whole dynamic changes. It's very effective. It's very, very quick to do. We run change programs that's around about 4 days long, and very, very rarely we get somebody come back at a later stage to have other stuff pulled inside out. And it works really well. So we're not actually traumatizing anybody, because we're not interested in the trauma, because effectively that is a representation. It's a story which they've created, and many people kind of add on to it, so their story gets bigger and bigger over a period of time. But we focus on the emotion and change the whole dynamic.
So, again, to add a question, so somebody who's completely traumatized, not speaking about why, but completely traumatized, could be through conflict
Yeah.
or an accident or a serious crime, something like that. You're saying that it's usually one visit of 4 days and that's it, done, finished.
Yes, generally, yes. Um, 4 days is enough time to be able to allow us to lead somebody into a relaxed state where we can actually explore and investigate what's going on with the series of negative emotions that are attached to the trauma. So yeah, it's very rarely we actually get somebody come back after that, but occasionally we do. It's a bit like peeling the layers off of an onion until you get to the kernel in the middle, where once you remove that, the whole thing changes its dynamic, it changes its appearance.
And how much would a person have to pay, Talking to Minds, to get treatment? Because a lot of these people who are suffering trauma, their lives are in a terrible state. They could even be homeless. But how much would it cost for somebody to be treated? Not that cost to you. I mean, to cost to them, Bob.
Well, the cost to them is zero. We've been we were advised by the Charity Commission to put some kind of cost to it for them, but we've continued to do it for free. But what we do is we ask them to go away, and once they've been successfully treated, or successfully worked with, is to go away, spread the good news, and go and raise some funds so that we can then assist somebody else through the programs.
I've read that the government spends up to £22 million a year in helping veterans. Yet the figures I've also read from 2018, published by the British Legion, suggest that there could be up to 1,000 veterans living on the streets. And further to that, tragically, the suicide rate appears also to be a constant for ex-military personnel. Would you agree that the government is doing all it can for veterans and treats them well?
No, no, I wouldn't agree that they're doing all that they can. They're very good, and the military are very good, and some of these larger organisations are very good at coming out with global statements, such as we take the mental health of our service personnel very seriously, and we're doing everything that we can to help. They're not. Not once. Not once has anybody gone outside of Parliament, outside of the system to go and actually speak to people themselves. They've held loads of meetings, in government. We've been to loads over the years, and it's a case of that's great. They sit in their ivory tower, sit in their office, but they're not speaking to the guys. So when you're looking at therapeutic approaches, such as trauma-focused ones, the only statistics that they're getting are from the health system, from the organisations that are delivering those therapies. So they're not actually speaking to the guys. And I have to question if somebody is going and receiving treatment for 15 years, then obviously that treatment isn't working. So, in the words of Einstein, to do the same thing and to expect to get a different response, therein madness lies. And I fail to see that these guys are actively getting out there and finding out what's working and what's not. There seems to be a big officers club that's going on, where there's money going into wages and directorships, but it's not going in the right direction as far as I'm concerned, just to be blunt.
You mentioned the health service. So, are the other mental health organisations that would have previously been the only port of call for veterans? So, I'm going to throw in a quote from you: "If it doesn't work for 15 years, it's probably never going to." So, the only port of call for veterans and others with post-traumatic stress disorder, are those organisations being supportive of the work you guys are doing at Talking to Minds?
No, they're not. Is the answer in a nutshell? No, these big organisations are being run like corporates, and it would detract from their earning potential and the money that they have in their system if they were to go down a route where they're engaged with an organisation like ourselves that are getting results, because that takes away from their income. So the more people that they have on their books, the better financially it is for them.
Okay, here in Scotland, well, we have, or rather had, one of the first hospitals to treat, as it was known back then, battle fatigue. Craig Lockhart Hospital, I'm sure you've heard of it, in Edinburgh, was at first originally, to my understanding, for officers from battle fatigue. I believe the unit opened in 1916 until 1919. So my question is, shell shock, battle fatigue, or post-traumatic stress disorder, are these the same?
Yes, they're exactly the same. It's just the nuance that they've come out with now. Post-traumatic stress disorder. There's now a blast injury condition as well that's caused. There's blast lung. There's a whole load of things that are attached to this now, and very shortly they'll come up with another terminology for it.
So just indulge me for a moment. Let me run this scenario past you. It's Monday morning at 9 o'clock, and you're now sitting at your desk in Whitehall. And on the brass plate on the door, it says Bob Paxman, Welfare Minister for ex-military personnel. My question is simple. What are you going to do?
What am I going to do? Well, the first thing is to make sure that we're actually getting the correct information coming in. So that means going out there and speaking to the right people, not the statisticians, not the medical services, but the guys themselves, because the guys themselves know exactly what they want and exactly how far that they've come through themselves with their own treatment and whether they've got well or whether they haven't got well. So it would be to go out there and actually speak to people and have a look at, see what was going on out there. It would then be a case of making sure that from a political perspective, somebody wasn't going to come in and sideswipe me out of the equation. I see that there is, obviously without naming names, I see that there are things going on with government, and there are some people that are making a lot of positive noises. But in actual fact, the veterans are basically turning around and saying they're feathering their own nests politically. And there's nothing has really changed over the last 10 or 20 years. You're talking about coming back out of a hostile environment and doing decompression. Uh, a decompression, all that is a pint of pie and a piss up. That's it. How on earth can that help? How on earth can that help with reduce the amount of PTSD within the guys? Yeah, that people are coming back from, or certainly from Afghan, they were coming back. The numbers of uh, military personnel that were getting involved in violence increased significantly. Going and doing a decompression for a couple of weeks doesn't do anything. And the identification system trim that they've got, brilliant. It's fantastic. Somebody's made an awful lot of money out of that. They've rolled it out into the military. They've even rolled it out into the fire brigade and they're putting it into all sorts. Who trims the trimmers? And trim is trauma risk incident management. Yeah. So they're basically going in and seeing who is likely to be suffering from a post traumatic stress disorder or a severe stress related condition. Who trims the trimmers? Because they're sat there listening to people's graphic, gruesome stories, and then once they've admitted to the fact that there's something potentially going on wrong with them going on in their heads, then they're suspended from work, they're sent home. So nobody wants to turn around and go, yeah, there's something wrong with me, because everybody else is going to turn around and go, don't work with him. So it's flawed, massively flawed system.
So that person is then cut loose, and basically left to swim against the current of trauma. Sounds like I'm glamatizing it, but I can assure you that I'm not glamatizing it. That's a terrible. Now the trimmers, tell me, the trimmers, are they qualified?
They do a trim course, so it's a questionnaire. There is no intervention with trim. It's a case of identifying whether somebody is likely to or is suffering from a severe stress-related type condition. It doesn't help them. All it does is identify whether they are or not.
So you're the minister. After that process, what would you do? It's up to you. It's up to you 100%. What would you do after that process? So now they're being cut free and basically left, which is what this whole program's about.
I would change the system. I would change the way that people are spoken to, the way that people are treated, the whole mechanism of treatment. I'd change the whole thing. What works for one person doesn't work for another. So it would be a case of choice. Now, what I see is lots of people going out and doing CBT, EMDR, psychotherapy, counselling, and they're still sick. They're still suffering at the end of that. Well, that says to me it's not working. And so therefore they then put them onto a chemical cosh. They give them tablets to try and take the feelings away and try and dull things down. That's not dealing with it. All that's doing is benefiting the pharmaceutical industry and allowing the trauma-focused therapies to continue. And having had an experience, CBT and EMDR and a whole raft of things that don't work, that all they do is just re-traumatize somebody. That's it. And for some of the guys, things like CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, which has been around for donkey's years, wasn't even designed for mental health conditions like this. It's been around for years, and guys, some of the guys will actually turn around and respond to it. But then 6 months later, they have all the nightmares and all the feelings start flooding back again. So then they have to go for more. So they're caught in this revolving door syndrome with medication and therapies that don't work for them. So I would positively go in, make an assessment, make an appreciation, and change the through route for them, the pathway, change the whole thing.
Are you seeing more people come through your doors and a diverse group of people that are seeking therapy? But are you generally seeing more people come through your doors?
Well, during this whole COVID thing, no, the whole thing has just really kind of ground to a halt. We're reluctant to deal with people over the telephone because that to me, you can't make an appreciation of how somebody is over the telephone. All you can do is listen to a story, and the interventions are very difficult because we actually need to have somebody face to face. So for us, it's been, for the charity, it's been really quite difficult over the last 12 months or so. And that's something that we desperately need to change. Even from a work perspective, our guys are all volunteers. We've not even been able to. Our website's gone down. We've not even been able to get that up and running over the last a couple of months because of issues. So that's something that we're trying to do as well at the moment. The numbers that are coming through are right across the board. They have tailed off because of the whole COVID thing. People just want to stay indoors, and the guys, a majority of the guys that are suffering, are in their late 40s, 50s, maybe into the 60s and more. So we're having to feel our way gently through this, as is pretty much every other company and charity.
I think that the whole climate and mood for the whole, well, this country anyway, has been horrendously bad, and I can't imagine how somebody with mental health issues would be feeling. It's just more rocks in the rucksack, if that's the way to put it.
It
So,
is, yeah.
so lastly, Bob, on the subject of suffering in silence, if anyone feels that their pride just won't allow them to seek help from you at Talking to Minds because of the way their family and friends see them, or at least the way they think themselves seen as a rock, someone unshakable, and maybe it's that persona they think they have to keep up, or maybe they think it's best just to rough it out and not open up to anyone or seek help, what would you tell them?
This is totally confidential. Nobody is going to know that they've been to us. Yeah, we've got guys that are serving military, serving police, and civilians of all sorts of descriptions that are coming and seeing us off the radar, off grid, and that's
Mhm.
because they want to
Yep.
get well. We're not interested in somebody that wants to hold on to it to further their. Uh, there are some people that hold on to their illnesses because it benefits them in some way. Yeah. So, oh,
Really?
poor love. Oh, it must be terrible, and they get sympathy for it. Some people thrive off of that. The people that we're interested in really want to get well. So when they make that decision to change, they come and see us, and they change because they've already set themselves up for
So
change.
I'm going to add another question here. So if you guys weren't around and this problem, and it is a problem, goes unchecked, give me a prediction. What will happen?
What will happen? Increased levels of violence, increased levels of yeah, problems at home. Um, it's it's not good for the guys. Suicide rates will go up. Yeah, it's just a negative impact on everything that's going on. We're not getting vast numbers through. A, because of COVID. B, because of funding. Yeah, and C, because of to get the marketing aspect, you've got to plow in a lot of money to be able to market the whole thing. And we're more about, well, we are solely about working with the individual as opposed to spending it on marketing. As I say, we're all volunteers, and we train up our own guys that have come through our programs. They want to go on and help others, and some of them actually come and train with us to help others as well. So it's like a self-licking lollipop, really.
So what drives you and your team? Because it's certainly not money. And talking to you and reading up on Talking to Minds, there is no glamour at all. I've looked at your site when it was up. There's no glamour. There's no money. What drives you to carry on? You and your team. What drives you? What's the end? What is the goal?
The thing that drives us, oh, sorry, the thing that drives us isn't so much a goal. It's seeing somebody change. They come in and they're absolutely full of negativity. They're really upset, and by the end of it, to see them have that physical change in their faces, and for them to get that light, that glow back, yeah, and for them to be thinking positively, to actually see that and witness that happening is something really addictive. So once we'd originally done one, we went, wow, that works. So let's do some more. And we 10, 20, 100, 1,000. By the time you get into it, yeah, we really are just about seeing that positive change in people. Yeah, there's no real end goal to it. It'd be lovely to be able to treat tens of thousands of people, but I think the machine is against us.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. So, lastly, on this subject, is there an age limit?
Well, originally, organisations like the British Legion, they were set up to allow former service personnel from the war to go and sit with their own kind and enjoy the banter, and that in some shape or form would have been therapeutic for the guys, especially if they were coming back with negativity, the nightmares and flashbacks. That would have been good for them. Yeah. And then the Royal British Legion decided that they're going to open the doors and allow anybody in. So these servicemen's clubs were then open to the public. Well, that kind of defeated the whole object of it. And now they've got veterans breakfast clubs, which is fantastic because people are now sharing ideas, sharing experience, and that in itself is therapeutic to a certain extent. So, yeah, I believe personally that things have to change, but it's going to take change from the top because the funding comes from the top. The majority of the funding comes from the top. Some of these organisations are absolutely awash with money, and they will stay awash with money because they're corporate beasts now, as opposed to being what they were set up for in the first place, which were caring organisations to facilitate change.
So, Talking to Minds works. So, why aren't the government
Oh,
taking
oh
you
yeah.
seriously? Because I mean, you might say, well, they are taking this seriously, but if you're telling me you get zero money and you guys are having to do this on a shoestring and probably less, you're probably having to borrow that shoestring. Why aren't the government taking you guys
Yeah,
seriously after the amazing results that you have?
but it's bureaucracy. You're looking at let's say the top universities. Yeah, let's say King's College. Everybody relies on the whole system relies on King's College for their data, for their approaches, for their recommendations. They don't want change. It takes 7 years or so to become a psychiatrist. How could they accept people that could train in 6 or 12 months, yeah, to be able to help people because they haven't done 7 years, and that's exactly the type of approach that's taken by them. We've spent an awful lot of time going out there and having academic papers, studies, meeting people, and it's come to the square root of nothing. So we've just gone back underground, continuing to do what we do and helping people come through. Yeah, it was an incredible waste of energy, time, and money trying to trying to demonstrate to them what we had works, even though the academics behind it actually turn around and say, "Well, this is some amazing results here, long-term positive change." So it's a bureaucracy thing as opposed to anything else.
So, on a more positive note, Bob, what excites you for the future?
What excites me for the future? Um, Everything excites me for the future. I really enjoy what I'm doing. Um, I would like to see more people come through in the charity, and also like to see the business aspect of what I do increase as well over the coming years. Um, what for the future? getting through this whole COVID thing would be fantastic. I'm absolutely sick and tired of
Oh,
hearing
no,
about it now.
I think the whole
Yeah,
country.
there's
Yeah, I think the whole country would be
yeah,
with that. Yeah.
yeah, it'd be nice once that's done and dusted.
Oh, absolutely. I want to talk about your company, if you don't mind, Paradigm Security. Am I right in saying it's not your average guy with a torch walking around an empty building site at night? Could you talk about what your company's services undertake?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely not walking around with a flashlight. Right, well, we've got two aspects to it. We've got the training aspect to it, specialist training, and the operational side of it. So, from a training perspective, we're doing advanced covert surveillance, intelligence gathering, intelligence operations. We're teaching close protection, hostile environments training, teaching the guys, preparing them for going overseas into a hostile environment. We're doing education and training. We're doing business management. There's a whole load of academic things that we're doing, and we've put together a load of very very specialist bespoke courses, and we've managed to get funding for it through the government as well. So it doesn't cost the guys. It's taken out as an advanced learner loan. So it, the guys come and train with us, and then they don't start paying anything back until they're over a threshold, which is 26.5 grand a year. And then we've got the operational side of it, where we employ some of those guys, not just in the UK, but places around the world. We employ them to go overseas and literally do what we've been teaching them to do. So we're helping blokes stand apart from the rest. And there's many guys that have come through us, training wise, that have actually come through the charity as well. So this really is an extension of of what we do on other playing fields, if you like.
Bob, tell people where they can find you and about any and all upcoming events that we should mark on our diaries.
Well, really, from a charity perspective, there aren't any planned up and coming events. We go over to Greece once a year on a Spartan 300 march, where the guy volunteers get dressed up as Spartans and march to the hot gates at Thermopylae to raise money for the charity, which is quite a good thing. It's quite a good trip. Diary wise, there's not really a lot coming up, but there's from a company perspective and training perspective, there's a load of stuff on the internet, on the website, also Facebook and Twitter, the usual sort of formats. So yeah, it's worth going and having a look. We'll get some interesting people pop on there as well. Some very famous ex SAS guys that come along and give the blokes lectures and stuff. So yeah, all good.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate your time, and hopefully I'll come down to your HQ and we'll do a follow-up cast and make a video probably, if that's okay.
That'd be fantastic. If you fancy coming out on the range with us, we'll get some firearms out for you to have a play with as well.
Well, we'll see about that, but I'd certainly like to come down and see what you guys do, and I'll put a link from Talking to Minds as soon as it's up and running onto our Facebook page. And I'd like to thank you.
Bless you. Thank you very much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
And that was the Bob Paxman interview. This cast, as you've heard, was not about Bob's time as an SAS soldier, and certainly not about the operations that these troops undertake. There are plenty of books and videos on that subject matter. This cast was about my highlighting of the cost that many servicemen and women are paying long after their service has finished. This cast was about the serious gaps in the help needed for those who have put themselves literally in the line of fire for the benefit of us all. I personally think it obscene in this day and age that an organisation such as Talking to Minds has to go cap in hand in order to bring a much needed cure to those in need, but perseveres anyway. Remember, this is not a long-term therapy, but as you have listened to firsthand, this, for most people actively seeking help, is a cure. Just in case you've forgotten, Talking to Minds website is down at the moment, but you can check out the work they do on YouTube and Facebook. There are also plenty of testimonials and articles on the internet mentioning Talking to Minds and their continuing good work. But keep checking on the website, as I'm sure it'll be up and running soon, hopefully. Lend them any support you can, and please take the time to tell others of Bob and his team's selfless work. It could make a huge, life-changing difference to someone. Of that, I'm sure. And so, my friends, it's time for me to go. I enjoyed making the show. I enjoyed talking to Bob, and I'm thankful for the time he gave us today. The show notes for this episode will be on our Facebook page. Give us a like if you do. Feel free to leave a comment, but please keep them kind. And lastly, but no means by least, I've really enjoyed spending time with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Be safe. Take care. Bye.
Slick Podcast. Keeping it real. And always keeping it groovy.